All right, Holly here, today joined by Coach Kiah, a former California rancher turned international speaker and joy coach. From losing more than 100 pounds to finding self worth beyond the scale, she has a story that'll meet you right where you're at. Whether you're battling burnout, trying to get healthy, raising kids, running a business, or all of the above, you'll want to hear this one. So, welcome, Kiah. I'm so glad that you joined me today.
Hello, Holly. It is such a joy to be here.
I guess to get started, can you tell us just a little about you? Where you're at, where you came from? I don't know, all the
Yeah,
things.
absolutely. Okay, to make a long story short, as your intro mentioned, I grew up in California, in rural California. I'm the sixth generation to be raised on my family's cattle ranch. My nieces that are growing up there are now the seventh. So I have very, very deep agricultural ranching roots. I went to school out west. I thought I was going to go in a career far away from agriculture because while I loved the beef industry and the agriculture industry I was raised in, I found out that I loved people more. And growing up, I had this pretty narrow view of what being involved in agriculture looked like. And so I didn't think that it was meant for me. And life has a funny way of panning out because I found my way back into agriculture, or I should say, agriculture kept its grips in me in a way that I just couldn't escape it. And I found my joy and place within this industry by taking all sorts of different turns. I started my career in ag communications working for the Kentucky Cattlemen's Association after living abroad for a year. And through that role, I have a husband, a Kentucky Southern boy, which is how I landed here in Kentucky, which is now where I reside with my husband and my almost 6 month old daughter, Callaway. Totally by accident, I became a speaker and a life coach just by simply following my own joys, sharing more about my story online, and having people kind of invite me in all sorts of different ways. So, what I do now in my day to day life when I'm not parenting or working on our small little hobby urban farm here in the city is I get to travel all across the country and all around the world, getting to really empower the people within agriculture and outside of agriculture to love themselves deeper, care for themselves better, and find joy in this messy, beautiful journey of life. And I'm so grateful to have found this really my own place that harnesses my talents in the agriculture industry in a way that I could have never expected.
I love that. But I think I followed you, not maybe your whole journey, but for a good chunk of it. And so it's been kind of fun and interesting to watch from the sidelines. And then we got to meet in person last year. And
Yes.
so to actually get some one on one time with you was fun and unique in its own way and very rewarding. I'm so thankful for that time that we got to spend together. Okay, well, let's talk about the origin story. You
Yes.
grew up on a California cattle ranch. Can you, I don't know, tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I think when people think of California, I think the imagery that usually comes to mind is, maybe the beaches, maybe Hollywood, maybe big cities. And I think it's easy for people to forget that California is the number one agricultural state. And where I grew up, honestly, it looks a little bit more like West Texas, Holly, if I'm being honest. If I was just to drop you on my family's cattle ranch, I don't think your first guess would be like, oh, we're obviously in California. I grew up
Yeah.
in high desert, like very barren. I had to drive an hour one way to go to the grocery store, high school, the closest gas station, like very, very rural. And I think growing up that way, I didn't fully appreciate how rare and unique of a childhood experience that was. And hindsight's always 2020, and I look back and I'm so grateful for such a unique experience and for all the lessons that growing up that way really taught me and instilled in me. It's interesting because when I ended up moving, studied at UC Davis in Northern California, and my major was actually human development and education. And I moved to Europe for a year after that. And when I came back home to the States, I was looking for jobs and I got this job with the Kentucky Cattlemen's Association. And I think people always assume, like, oh, it must have been a big culture shock. And the biggest culture shock for me was not living in Kentucky. I think it was the cattle industry. I had no idea just how vastly different the cattle industry was from one side of the state of the US to the other. And they don't brand cattle in Kentucky. They don't gather by horseback. I think cowboy hats are more prevalent now, but they don't usually wear cowboy hats. And
Yeah.
they actually get rain here, which we don't have back home in California. And so it was just so vastly different. And I think that also really made me also appreciate the beef industry as a whole too, having those more experiences across the country. But growing up out West, I did 4-H, I did FFA. That's really where I guess I started my speaking career through my youth
Yeah.
ag leadership programs.
Yeah.
And
Right.
my grandpa always told me that whatever I ended up doing in the future, he knew that it had to be something with people. And it's so interesting to think back and realize that my grandpa saw something in me long before I ever saw it in myself. And I really struggled when I came into my career of like, how do I give back to this family, this ranch that raised me, with such deep, strong roots? It's a legacy that I want to continue going on. But how do I do that if I'm not actually boots on the ground, if I'm not actually here at the
Yeah.
ranch?
Yeah.
And when me and my friend were putting together a TV show called Backroad Cowgirls, we interviewed my grandpa, and he gave me the greatest gift in that interview. I asked him, I said, Grandpa, where do I fit? How do I continue this family's legacy? And he really told me, he said, the ranch is here to give you roots, but it's not here to keep you stuck. How can you use your own talents to go and continue to feed those roots? How can you use your gift of storytelling to help really tell those stories and elevate the stories like the ranch you grew up on? And it gave me this sense of purpose and instilled in me this realization that, oh, the best gift I could give my family isn't necessarily having to be here living on the ranch. I can live in Kentucky, I can live anywhere in the world, and I can continue my family's ranching legacy in my own unique way, which has just been such a gift to allow me to really fly the coop and to flourish and kind
Yeah.
of find my own place in this industry, which I'm grateful for.
Well, I will say I really love that story because we'll get to this here in just a little bit, but I worked with you one on one last year in a body confidence program, which I attribute a lot of my changes and successes over the past year with my physical, mental health too. So I appreciate that very much. But you bring up, I think, something that stuck with me. We did a couple of exercises through that program, and one of them was a visualization of a tree. The roots, I think, were kind of what you were saying, what your grandpa shared with you. I kind of had that same, I don't know, thing. And my grandpa was in this visualization too, and we were talking about rooting down your foundations, but having the confidence to still flourish. And so I don't know if that's where that particular exercise stemmed from or anything, but I know that I certainly enjoyed it so much so that it has stuck with me. It's something I still think about to this day. I was thinking about it even just this last week as I was guiding some of our team members through just some growth exercises. And
It's
anyway,
so funny, Holly. That visualization you're talking about, I had never actually connected those two dots together before. So I'm
oh
so glad
really?
that you connected
How
those
funny.
for me. That is
Yeah.
so funny. Yeah, the visualization that Holly's alluding to, it's this visualization meditation, and it brings you to this like visualization of you imagine this tree in the middle of a meadow, and the roots represent the values that you got from your family of origin that were instilled in you. The trunk is about the values that you learned from like your education and your community and your upbringing, and then the leaves are really the values that you want to continue to flourish and thrive and grow for yourself. And so it gives you this appreciation for where you come from, how you're raised, what you were instilled in, but also this freedom to realize that you can flourish in your own way, which I think is so, so helpful in our growth journeys.
I don't know. It was so impactful to me. I mean, I still think about it. And I was traveling to Charleston, South Carolina at the time, and I don't know if anyone's been there, but they have the huge, I mean, just those huge
Gorgeous
trees.
trees.
And it's like I saw the one I saw that I had visualized, and some people might
Yeah.
think that's crazy cuckoo, but I
Ooh, chills.
swear,
I love
yeah,
that.
I did. Yeah, and I was like, oh, this is a
Right
God thing.
place,
This
right
is a
time.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I
yeah.
love that.
Let's dive in a little bit more into joy, redefining joy.
Yeah.
Joy versus happiness.
Yeah.
What's the difference? I don't know. Dig in a little there and tell me about that.
I think where I want to start with this conversation is my own personal quest for joy, and really like my own discovery of how I understand joy and how what I used to think it was. So the thing that I didn't mention in my origin story of sorts is that, I think all of us, everyone in our lives, no matter where we come from, where we're headed, I think that we could probably all agree that all of us want to cultivate more joy and happiness in our lives, right? That's the good stuff. We
Yes.
want to create more of it. Even in the Declaration of Independence, it says that we have the right to the pursuit of happiness. Like it literally says that in our Declaration of Independence. And growing up, I think I had this vision of what joy was and how I could create more joy in my life. And I think for me, I had this idea of what success was. I thought success would bring me more joy. More success equals more joy. When I thought of success, I thought success came from getting all the gold stars, doing all the right things, making sure that I was a quote unquote good girl, and also looking the part. Growing up, at a very young age, I started to really struggle with my own body image. I would say the earliest I can remember was probably kindergarten, is when I first decided to go on my first intentional diet. Because I had this idea in my head that what I wanted to be when I was a little girl was I wanted to be a future star, right? Like very vague. I didn't care what kind of star it was. I was like, I want to be the girl singing and dancing on stage at a concert. I want to be the next Disney movie TV star. Like I wanted to be a performer, a star. When I looked at people that were on stages, when I looked at people that were on TV, I didn't feel like I looked like them. There wasn't representation of individuals in those spaces that looked like me. And I grew up in the same society that all of us did, which definitely was one that perpetuated this beauty standard, this idea of beauty. And to me, I equated beauty growing up with beauty is thinness. It became this hyper focus of mine that if I want to be beautiful in order to pursue my dreams of becoming a star, then I need to look a certain way and I need to lose weight. And it became this North Star for me. At the age of 5, all the way through elementary school, all the way through high school, through college, through my young professional career, I thought everything that I wanted, including more joy and happiness, was on the other side of looking a certain way. And I pursued it and failed at that pursuit over and over and over again for so, so long. And I feel like I never was able to land in this place where I could feel like I fully loved and accepted myself in the skin that I was in. Long story short, this was maybe when our worlds connected, Holly, or maybe it was a little bit after, but it was 2018. I had read this book and it kind of sparked this personal development growth journey for me. And I started learning different mindset tools. It's also when I started my own entrepreneurial journey. I decided to try again at taking better care of myself. Long story short, it worked in a lot of ways. I became a really healthy version of myself, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. And I had lost 100 pounds in 1 year. And it was amazing. I couldn't believe that I had actually done the thing that I had tried to pursue for so long. And I started getting invited to be on, different media and People Magazine and Good Morning America. And I got invited to go down to the Kelly Clarkson show in Hollywood and do this interview. And I was like, oh my gosh, is everything that I wanted, stardom, really on the other side of losing weight? Because everything kind of feels like it's flowing to me because of this before and after transformation. But what I discovered in that journey was that everything that I wanted, that I thought was on the other side of looking a certain way, was actually available to me all along. I learned that you can be self-hating and miserable in a smaller body. You can also be wildly confident and love yourself in a larger body. I learned that the joy that I was seeking actually had nothing to do with the physical body that I was in, but had everything to do with my relationship with my body, regardless of how it looked. What was so interesting was that it took me learning how to love myself as my body was shrinking to realize that I needed to learn how to love myself in a body that would expand again. Because, spoiler alert, I gained a lot of the weight back. And I just recently went through pregnancy and I'm in my postpartum phase. I think what I've come to understand is our bodies are constantly changing, especially as women and, carrying babies and raising babies. And I think what I've come to realize is it wasn't standing on a scale and having it read a certain number that I wanted. What I wanted was what I thought weight loss would mean for me, which was more self confidence, more self love, more energy, more joy. That's what I wanted. And what I realized was, oh, I can feel loved, I can feel confident, I can feel worthy, I can feel joyful regardless of what my body looks like. That's something that I really felt like I wanted to share with other people was how can we spend our lives not just in this pursuit of joy and happiness, but how can we learn how to find it right now in this moment so that when we actually do find it, we actually know how to experience it. I think what I also learned the hard way was that our capacity to feel joy and happiness is actually directly related to our capacity to feel all the hard stuff too. I think some of us focus our whole lives trying to avoid feeling the bad things like sadness, grief, anger, insecurities, all these things. We try to shove all of them down because we think if we do, we'll feel happier. But I think what we actually need to do is increase our capacity to just feel all the things we want to feel. Because if we numb the hard stuff, we also numb our capacity to feel the joy too.
I have had a significant health journey over the last year, lost a significant amount of weight, but I think, and so it's hard for me to like pinpoint what to attribute the change to, but I can almost, I don't know if it's 100%, but 90 something percent say it was during that time and that mindset shift that I can love my
Mm,
body through the process. Like it,
mhm.
100% what you just said is the exact same thing I was navigating. And it was like, even though I'd had this goal to get healthy, lose the weight, whatever XYZ that my goal was, it's like it clicked last year that I was never going to achieve it until I loved me as I was. And that
Mhm.
me as I was worth whatever the change was that I wanted to make,
Yeah.
whether that was physical or not, you know. I don't know. I just love everything that you just shared because I feel like I did that very transition
Yeah.
myself, transformation, if you will. And I think having that moment of epiphany, even at the time, 39 years old, and being like, why did it take me so long to figure this out?
Yeah. It's so interesting because I feel like a lot of us, when it comes to any change we want to make, we allow shame to be the main source of fuel. And when we allow shame to be the main source of fuel of like, oh, I don't like myself like this, I need to change myself, and then I'll finally accept myself. What I've come to realize is that if shame is the fuel, even if your body changes, you will still find ways to shame yourself. And so we focus so much on, I want to have a different life, a different body, a different relationship with myself. And I think it's okay to want to make changes in your life. Of course it is, to want to better yourself in whatever way. But I think it's really important that we get clear on the root of why and how we're trying to instill those changes. And I think, for me, even before I lost 100 pounds, it wasn't about saying, I hate this body, let's fix it. And trust me, I tried it that way a million times before, never worked out. The biggest difference was me being able to look in the mirror and say, okay, I'm not going to pretend that I love my body yet, right? I don't think we need to lie to ourselves if we're not there yet. But it was about looking in the mirror and saying, but I am grateful that I have a body, that this body got me out of bed today. And I am committed to learning how to love and accept myself as I am. Because when we learn to fuel that journey with love and acceptance, that's when we actually decide that we're worthy of making the change we want to make, that we're worthy of actually treating ourselves better. I think that so many of us have it backwards. We're like waiting to look a certain way to feel confident instead of saying, how can I feel really confident in myself now so that I actually feel worthy enough to treat myself better in whatever way that looks like, you know?
I do know 100%. I also think, and there you mentioned about acknowledging the heavier kind of the word you used in
Yeah.
there. I was like, I think that was also it. I think for so long I'd tried, and I'm sure many have tried to squash it down. And if
Yes.
I can just, the guilt, the shame, the whatever, if I can just squash it down enough that the positive
Mhm.
light, whatever it is, will shine through. And I even had this conversation with someone yesterday, and it was like that, like, why don't we kind of just pause and acknowledge it? Let's acknowledge that
Mhm.
guilt, that shame. Let's bring light into it, and
Yes.
then let's work through it. I don't know. I think that's been a huge transformational mindset shift for me as well, is to
Yeah.
acknowledge the heavy, the dark, the whatever it may be, the
Mhm.
shame, the guilt, the frustration, bring light to it, try to find joy there and decide. Yeah, I know it's easier said than done,
For
but
sure.
after having walked through it, and by no means do I feel like the journey is ever over. I think it's always a continuous process, but I do feel like there have been distinct moments of recognition of,
Mm.
oh, like, like
Yeah.
this is,
I think real quick, I love that you said about the bringing the light to it. I really love it, helps me to think in pictures and visuals. I love to imagine that those negative emotions like fear, shame, guilt, I imagine them like they're this mold that's growing in the back of a dark closet. And I think a lot of us, like let's say we have some friends or family over to our house, we don't want them to see our moldy closets, right? We don't want them to see the dirty parts of our house. We're going to shut the door and lock that stuff up tight, right? But when we close the door on a moldy closet, the only thing that happens is that mold continues to fester and grow until eventually it overtakes the closet until eventually overtakes the entire home. And then we can't manage it anymore. And the same thing I think is true for those heavy, difficult, uncomfortable emotions like our fear, our shame, our guilt. And so, really, the solution is, which feels so counterintuitive to so many of us, is to open the door, to let in the air, let in the light, because mold can't thrive there, and neither can fear, shame, guilt. I think one of the things that keeps us from expressing those feelings openly with one another
Mhm.
is that we have this fear that there's going to be someone who's going to judge us and that we're not going to belong anymore. It's like this we're our connection feels threatened because we're afraid that if I say this, it's going to make it real, or if I say this, someone's going to judge
Yeah.
me. And every time I've ever raised my hand and talked openly about my mold, about whatever the hard thing is I'm navigating, every single time the person says, "Oh my gosh, me too." And that is where you take your power back from it, right? That's where it dissipates. It doesn't feel as heavy to hold anymore. And I think just creating more space for our own humanity helps us manage it a little bit easier, right? It feels less heavy. It feels less like it's going to overtake us.
I feel that. Also, I guess just bringing this whole discussion, body confidence, mental health, into rural spaces, like how, I guess this might be a two-part question. How do you feel that impacted you, like growing up, like as a small child? And then how does that
Mm.
conversation matter now in agriculture? Because I feel like I think it's an issue like we discussed, like probably nationwide, like
Yeah.
industry wide, like across all industries. But I think specifically speaking to our audience here, more than likely, and this in ag and in rural spaces, like I guess what do you have to speak
Yeah.
to them or they're out there to that?
You know what's interesting is growing up really rural in the industry that I did, I don't think I had the awareness of what was going on or what was being discussed or not discussed, just because it was what I think in hindsight, I can look back now and realize the conversations that weren't happening and how they affected my family. So, just to be candid, my family's been ranching in the same area since the late 1800s. And my family, my extended family, has struggled a lot with alcoholism, which I think is a result of mental health struggles. That has just been a coping mechanism for many people in my family because in my family, we didn't talk about emotions. It wasn't something discussed, right? Like so many people in the rural agriculture community, and this is a generalization. I know this isn't true for everyone, but I think it's fair to say, I think you'll probably agree with me, Holly. We're the rough and tough industry, right? If you're crying, I'll give you something to cry about. You fall, rub some dirt in it, dust up, like we don't have time to cry. We pride ourselves on being strong and tough. And I think somewhere along the way, we mistook being strong and tough with being stoic and not willing to share our emotions. I think right now there's this shift, and I almost think like it's our generation's job to help show that strength comes from our vulnerability, that is where true strength is, and we need to learn how to open up these conversations and communicate. And in hindsight, now looking back at my family and how I was raised, I can see the way not having a safe space to discuss our emotions, how it has eroded a lot of our mental health. And people in my family who I love and care about, I can see the way that it has
Yeah.
really deeply hurt and affected them over time. I think for us in this industry moving forward, I think it starts by having the courage to talk about things out loud, to create spaces where we can share so that we can reduce that stigma, right? And again, it's easier said than done. And I think that I feel hopeful though. I feel hopeful that our
Yeah.
generation and the next generation of agricultural leaders, it is a different culture. And I just got done speaking at Kentucky FFA camp. I spent 5 weeks, each week speaking to 400 different students. And Holly, I am so encouraged. I'm so
Yeah.
encouraged by how this younger generation is able to communicate and talk about how they're feeling. It makes me feel like there's so much that we can learn from those younger than us. And we have to invite them into the conversations too. I think there's things that they're getting right that we got wrong, and vice versa. I think all generations have something to learn from one another. But I think that so much of reducing the stigma comes from being starting with our own self awareness, right? And then being brave enough to say the things out loud with other people, because the more we're able to raise our hand and say, "Hey, I'm struggling," it gives somebody else a safe space to say, "Oh my gosh, me too." right?
Me too. I think, well, my next question to you was going to be like if you were to share something with a young woman or a young person in ag, navigating maybe some rural or mental health struggles or
Mhm.
even body confidence struggles, what would you say or share with them? So I don't know, maybe give us a little tidbit of what you shared with the young FFAers out there.
I think what I would say is I think awareness is always the first step, right? We can't help to foster new skills and tools in an area we're struggling if we're not even aware of where we're struggling, right? Or where we're kind of caught up. And what I was telling these FFA students, we talked about this quest for joy, right? And the one thing I didn't mention before about the quest for joy is I think a lot of us fall prey to this. There's a term for it in psychology called the arrival fallacy. I call it the lie of once. And it's basically the story. We all have a different flavor of it, right? Like, I'll finally feel happy once I lose weight. I'll finally feel successful once we own the farm. I'll finally feel confident once I've made this much money. Whatever that flavor of the lie of once is, it's called the arrival fallacy because it's this false assumption that once we reach a goal, we will experience enduring happiness. It's not true, right? They did this fascinating study on Olympic athletes and movie stars, and they looked at their mental well being before and after they reached the pinnacle of their career. So, before and after they got the Emmy, the Oscar, before and after they got the gold medal. And they actually found that they had reduced mental wellness after they reached their goal.
Achieve the thing. Wow.
After they achieved the thing, they actually felt worse
Mm-hmm.
because they had all this identity built up into this one action. But once you cross the finish line and get a gold medal, not that I know from experience, I'm not an Olympic athlete. You're the same person with the same thoughts, the same beliefs. You just have a gold medal. And I think that all of us have this idea of once this happens, then everything's gonna be better. And we all know who Shaquille O'Neal is, right? The famous
Mm-hmm.
basketball player.
Yeah.
He was quoted once saying, "You don't think I got it wrong? I live in a 30,000 square foot home by myself." And I think what he's saying is that so much of what we're reaching for, this idea of success, whatever success means to you,
Mm-hmm.
I think what we're really missing is that the root of happiness actually has nothing to do with the circumstance. It doesn't have to do with how many gold stars, how many accolades, how much money, how much property, how fancy our Instagram photos look. It has nothing to do with that. And it is always something deeper underneath the surface. I just finished reading this book called New Happy, which I highly recommend. And to distill the book down into the main point is that happiness comes from being your authentic self and understanding your own unique gifts, which is easier said than done, and using those gifts to help other people, to be yourself and to give of yourself to support other people. That is really where we can find this deep happiness and purpose. And we can do that exactly where we're at. So what I had the students do at FFA camp and where I think I would have a start is we talked about our brain like these mental gardens, right? And we talked about how a lot of us have all these different seeds that were planted in us starting at a young age. And a lot of these seeds were different ideas, thoughts, and beliefs about ourselves that other people gave us. So, somewhere
Mm-hmm.
along the way in my own journey, the seed was planted in me that to be beautiful, you must be thin. And I think the thing that is important is for us to be aware of what is even going on in our mental thought gardens so that we can know which seeds are actually weeds that need to be pulled and which seeds are the seeds we want to continue to flourish and thrive. Where energy goes, things grow. And so many of us are unknowingly continuing to water those weeds, those beliefs and thoughts that maybe other people gave us growing up that don't serve us moving forward. I think one of the scariest statistics is humans have about 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, but the scary thing is that 90% of those thoughts are repetitive, which means that a lot of us have been thinking this negative belief about ourselves since we were young, and we've been waking up every single day and having that same belief go on and on and on. The more we think it, the more it feels true and factual. So, how do we even know what weeds are going on? How do we find that awareness? Because a lot of us are just walking through the world completely unaware of the fact that we are continuing to water these beliefs that are not helping us flourish and thrive the way we want to. And for me in
Mm-hmm.
my own journey, one of the biggest tools that helped me was journaling. And I know journaling is not for everyone. There's lots of different ways that we can practice awareness. But for me, writing down what I was thinking and feeling helped me create this distance between my brain and my thoughts and myself. I could physically see the thoughts that were on loop in my brain. And I could look at these thoughts and ask myself, is this actually true? Is this helpful? Is this kind? And if this isn't true, if this is one of those repetitive thoughts that's just a weed, how can I learn how to turn down the dial? How can I stop watering that belief and plant some new seeds of belief? Just like any habit, habits take time to establish. And the same thing is true for our beliefs about ourselves. Like, I wish you could snap your fingers and suddenly, like, oh my gosh, I love myself. I feel great. Everything's wonderful. No, it doesn't work that way, right? It
Work that.
comes from choosing every day to water this new seed, to water this new belief. I think awareness is the biggest piece. And for me, journaling was a huge tool. I also think that talking through things out loud with other people that can kind of be a mirror to you can be really, really helpful. Sometimes finding that awareness by yourself can feel tough, but I think that's the first place that I would start is get curious about what's even going on. What are you believing? And is it true? And if it's not true, what do we want to be true?
Coach Kiah always good with the visualizations, like with the garden in the mind. I love that. I really resonate with all of that actually too. Like on a personal level, I feel like journaling did bring to light some of the things, the repetitive, whatever darkness, the ugly, or the weeds, if you will, the weeds that needed to go. I did have a roadblock even getting started journaling just due to some past experiences with
Mhm.
writing and whatnot. But yeah, I think that is great. I think bringing awareness to it and addressing it, and then what's a weed, what's something I want to nurture, and then go from there. I think if you fast forward a little into like us now, into adults, how would you tell us or encourage us or any advice you have for us, those of us? How do you keep the joy while we're in the middle of the hustle? I mean, you're in the middle of this
Mm.
season, you're in postpartum, you've got a newborn baby. And
Yep.
what tips or advice do you have for us to keep the joy and keep trucking?
Yeah. I love this. I love this question because it's really interesting. Me and my husband are very similar in a lot of ways, but we're very different as well. And one of the biggest differences in the two of us is I am very future focused and oriented. Like, I can paint you a picture of what I want my life to look like 20 years from now vividly, right? Like, I'm good at brainstorming the far away future. My husband is like, I cannot see past next week. Like, he's very much more in the present moment, what needs to get done today. And I'm grateful for that because we kind of like I help him dream bigger. He helps bring me back to earth. Thank goodness for that. And one thing that I've found is while I think it's really helpful for me to paint this picture of where I want to go, what I want to create in the world, when I get too focused there, it can steal away my present joy. It's not allowing me to actually live and ground myself here. And so, one of the questions, I don't know if you'll find this helpful or not, but one of the questions that actually really helps me re-ground myself is me saying, what if this is as good as it got ever? Like, we live in this fixer-upper house on this little farm. This is just because it's top of mind, right? We have all these
Yeah.
ideas for what we wanna fix on the house. We start talking about, like, we need to replace the windows, we need to redo the kitchen, we need to do all these things. And I love to dream about the possibilities, but I sometimes have to ask myself, like, what if this house never changed? What if this is the house we lived in forever? What if my body never changed? What if this was the body that I lived in forever? What if this is as good as it got? That question isn't meant to be like, nothing's ever going to get better. It's not supposed to be a grim question. It's supposed to make you realize, oh, life is already really, really
Pretty
great.
good.
And I think
Yeah.
for myself, so much of finding joy in the journey of pursuing, whatever our goals are, because I listen, I love goals. I love having big goals for myself. But I know that the joy doesn't come from reaching the goal, and that's the biggest lesson that I've realized is that joy doesn't come from achieving the goal. Joy is something we have to choose to find in the pursuit. And so for me, finding joy in the journey really starts in its simplest form with gratitude, right? It's a way to ground yourself in this present moment of like, what are the things that you are so appreciative for right now in this moment, even if nothing ever changed moving forward? That helps bring me back to center, bring me back to the present moment, bring me back to the joy that exists right now in this moment. And there's this really great book that I highly recommend for anyone who feels like maybe they are a recovering high achiever like myself, or someone who gets so focused on where they're trying to go that they have a hard time feeling joy in the present moment. There's a book called The Gap and the Gain. And to distill the book down to the main point, they talk about how so many of us have a hard time to experience joy and happiness because we are always looking at the gap between where we are and where we want to go. And the thing that's tough about that gap is that for most of us, it's a moving target, right? How many of us have
Mhm.
reached a goal and then we're like, okay, amazing. Now I'm ready to move the goalpost. I'm ready to reach even further, right? Okay, I hit that revenue goal in my business. Great. We're going to double it now or whatever that is. Even when we reach our goals, we don't give ourselves permission to settle in and feel grateful and joyful in that moment because we've already set a bigger, better goal. We're already looking at the next gap. And if we're only ever focused on the gap between where we are and where we want to go, we will never feel fulfilled because there will always be a gap. It's like waiting until you're at the end of your to-do list to feel proud of yourself because we all know that to-do lists never are done. There's always more things on the to-do list. It's
Just
like
keeps
laundry. There's
going.
always more laundry to get done, right?
Yes. Amen.
So
Yeah.
the way to find joy is to actually look at the gain. And the only way to look at the gain is to look backwards. Instead of focusing on the gap between where you are and where you want to go, how can you pause and look backwards and look at the gain between where you are and where you've been? And I think that's where gratitude helps is, I'm like, oh my gosh, we live in this fixer upper house. The roof is still leaking. We have this old kitchen. We have all these things. The windows need to be redone. When I'm focusing on a gap in this home, I'm like, gosh, this feels exhausting and depressing. There's so much money to spend. But when I'm like, wait a minute, we own a home. We bought a home. This home is so much bigger than our one bedroom apartment we lived in California. Like, we're raising our baby here. We have a basement. Like, when I live in the gain,
Beautiful
this
garden. Like
a
you can't
beautiful
leave that.
garden, like,
Yeah.
there is so when I live in the gap, it steals away the realization that life is so good as it is.
Yeah.
So, my tip for you and wherever you're at in your journey, professionally, personally, is yes, have the goals for yourself. I definitely think it's important to reach for something, to want to better yourself in whatever that way is. But don't wait to reach the goal to feel happy, proud, and joyful. Those things need to exist right now because those feelings are also going to be the thing that keep you waking up and wanting to do better for yourself, right? And the way we do that is by finding gratitude in the gain in what is already ours.
I guess my next question for the like related to that was going to be any go-to rituals of getting out of the funk because you know we're going to settle in. So we've discovered we need to
Mhm.
be aware. We need to do something. We have gratitude. Is there any other tips or
Okay.
tricks that you have?
The getting out of the funk question, I think that back to the awareness thing,
Yeah.
I think getting aware of the things that put you in a funk. And I love this question right now specifically, Holly, because I for myself, one of the things that gets me in a funk is comparison. For me, comparison is really fueled by social media. And so, as we're recording this right now, I actually, after working with a business coach, I decided that I was going to give myself a hard social media break. So, no posting and also no scrolling through the end of the month. It was like a couple weeks. And it is amazing to me how much better I'm feeling, how much more like soulfully productive I've been
Yeah.
and more present in my own life I've been from taking that pause. And so I think if you find yourself in a funk, get curious about the things that if there's a pattern in your funkiness,
Yeah.
for me,
Yeah.
I know that there's a pattern when I'm in a funk. It's that I am consuming too much media and witnessing other people's lives more than being present in my own life. And so if I'm aware of that, I can help set some better boundaries for myself so that I can reorient and get myself back in a better headspace. The other thing for me, journaling is one of my go-to tools. I think if you're not someone who likes to journal, I think just maybe you're more of a verbal person than a written person. I think talking out loud with someone. So whether that is a close friend, a close family member, maybe it's a therapist, maybe it's a coach, someone that you can verbally process with to really, I guess, metaphorically open up the door. Our funk is the mold that lives in the closet. And we're like, I don't want to feel this. I'm going to keep the door shut. That never works. How can you open up the door and explore the funk, whether it's in your journal or with somebody else? I think that that's what helps that funk dissipate, to talk about it in some way, shape, or form. And the more we talk about it, I think the more that we can have the awareness of what the patterns are too, as well.
Yeah. My husband and I were just having this conversation because we have recently had 2 weekends where we did like a retreat S type thing or visited family or and friends. And, I come back and I feel so soulfully refreshed, like just
Yeah.
that refreshed feeling. And so we've actually talked about like what was it? Like, what is it? And I think honestly for us, it was a combination of the two. I think we called it front porch sitting. We had more front porch sitting where
Yes.
we put our phones down and just
Yes.
talk to one another, not just each other, but the folks that we were with, friends,
Sure.
family, whoever. So I think it was a combination of the two. And so I really resonate with that. So I think that's great awareness or great advice. And then also being aware of it. So now that you say that, I'm like, I think being aware of it, I think for me as well, I'm sure for many others, social media is probably a big thing. And I think not having someone to verbalize it with. And so find
Yes.
those people that you can
Yeah.
front porch sit with,
I
and put
love
the
that.
phones down. Yeah.
Because it's not only finding the pattern in the funk, but it's also finding the pattern in the freshness, right? Like you and your husband talked about, like, oh, it's the front porch sitting, it's the connection that gets us out of funk. So it's almost like recognizing your pattern, the pattern that gets you into funk. And maybe it's also like, it might not just be social media. Maybe there's certain people in your life that when you spend more time
Yeah.
with them, they make you feel like you're in a funk.
I think saying no to things is a thing.
Saying
I
no to
think that was
things.
something I
Yes.
identified last year was like,
Yes.
I felt a lot of shame and guilt and all those dark boxes that were there for
Mhm.
saying no, but I finally had to set some boundaries and say no. So I feel like
100%.
that could be an example of something else as well.
100%. And noticing those things, learning how to set boundaries, which is, a journey in itself. And then
Yeah.
also having some tools in your toolbox for yourself that can be personal to you, right? There's so many different tools out there in the world. Some of them work better for other people, some of them work better for different projects, but having some tools in your toolbox of knowing like, okay, I'm aware that I'm feeling in a funk. What are my go-to actions that help me feel renewed? I remember, Holly, when we first met in person, you talked about how much water is healing for you. So maybe you're like, okay, I'm feeling in a funk. I need a front porch, ideally with a water view. Like those are some tools in your toolbox that help you feel renewed and refreshed. And maybe for someone, maybe it's being outside in nature. Maybe it's quiet time. Maybe it's like a really intense workout. Maybe it's calling a friend. Whatever those tools are, having some in your back pocket that help you to defunkify. That's a fun word. I
Yeah.
like that
You
one.
don't go for sure. Well, my last and closing question for you, Kai, was going to be about what's the one thing you would tell someone listening now who's having a hard time finding joy? But I don't know. I feel like maybe we just covered that. But I guess if you had to say one thing, could you pinpoint
Mm.
one
One
thing
thing
listening?
to help you
Tell
find,
someone listening right now who's having a hard time finding their joy.
feels like a heavy question, Holly, but this is what I would
I
say.
know.
It's amazing to me how much a few deep breaths can help reground you. Like it's so simple, but honestly, I would say to take a pause if you're having a hard time. Maybe you're listening to this in the tractor. Maybe you're driving your kids to school. Wherever you are, if you're having a hard time, I would say recenter yourself in your breath. Like close your eyes unless you're driving. Please don't close your eyes. Pause and take like a few very intentional, deep breaths to just first help regulate your nervous system, just to help bring you a little bit of calm. For me, also that gratitude is really, really grounding. And so
Mhm.
acknowledge whatever feelings you're feeling, first of all. If you're having a hard time, like give yourself space to be like, yeah, this
Good
sucks
breath.
right now. It's okay.
Yeah.
We don't need to gaslight ourselves. Acknowledge what you're feeling. And then for myself, the one thing that helps me just bring that energy up a little bit is to root myself in the gratitude. And I think like come back to the present moment. I think that sometimes the thing that makes us feel funky is like all of the things that we feel like are on our to-do list.
Mhm.
But I actually had my cousin gave me a necklace that had this mantra on it, and it really helped me. And it's 2 words, and it's just this. And it's a reminder that the only thing that is real right now in this world is not what happened in the past. It's not what's happening in the future, but is literally the present moment. And so when you bring your attention to your breath and you just focus on just this moment, this is all that's real and true right now. It kind of helps me just come back to myself. Just this. That's all it is just this moment, just this wherever you're at right now. And that kind of helps me recenter. So I hope that helps. And yeah, beginning with some gratitude is and realizing that it's okay to want something different, to want to better yourself, to make a change, and also to recognize that those things can exist while also giving yourself permission and space to feel the joy and gratitude right now in this moment as well.
Yes. I love that. Just this. I think that's something else I'll take away from your that and our garden in our mind. I don't know. I feel like I could keep going, but I guess I should cut it off. I guess before I do though, Tell folks where they can find you. And I guess also plug, I know we didn't talk about it, but tell us a little bit about your trip in May because I'm really bummed I
Yes.
can't
Oh,
go.
I'm so bummed you can't come either. Yeah,
Yeah.
hindsight, I should have planned it a different time. But what Holly is talking about is I love to travel. I'm a big travel girl and I love people. Holly knows this too. I have found for myself that so much of my own self-discovery has come from exploring a different part of the world as I explore myself. I think there is so much, honestly, awareness and self exploration that can happen when we remove ourselves from our current everyday environments. When we leave our home, when we leave our work, when we go somewhere where we don't have to play any part, to play any roles, we just get to be present with ourselves in a new space. And I wanted to create that experience for other women. So a couple years ago, I hosted my first international retreat to Ireland. And now, on the other side of having my first baby, I'm ready to host my next international retreat. So in May of 2026, we are going to Costa Rica. This retreat is called Gals Gone Wild. It's for women of all ages and all stages of life to come and reconnect with their inner wild. And what I mean by that is to tap back into the version you were before before you became a mom, before you became a professional, a business owner, an employee. You don't have to be anyone else besides yourself on this retreat. It's a place for you to just come and be present. We're going to be doing some fun activities, of course. We're going to be doing horseback rides to waterfalls. We're going to have
Oh,
a
that sounds so
spa
nice.
day, like relaxation. We're going to go on some beautiful hikes through the jungle and up volcanoes. And we're also going to have some really, really awesome workshops and activities for you to come together with other women and just to reconnect with yourself. And I think Holly and I can both attest from our own experiences at retreats, whether hosting them or attending them, how soulfully rejuvenating it is.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
I would just love to invite anyone who feels like it's on their heart to go on an adventure on a trip, one that you don't have to plan. All you have to do is get to Costa Rica, and then I've got everything else planned for you there. Oh, and something else I want to mention, something that I'm doing different on this retreat is I'm bringing my friend Shelby, who is a photographer, so that the women who come on this retreat, if you don't want to get out your phone and take a single picture, you're going to have all of these beautiful photographs to capture the experience and to capture you in all your glory on this retreat too. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm bringing my mom. My mom comes with me on all my women's retreats, and I'm so excited. I love bringing together women from all different walks of life, from all different ages. And it's going to be really, really wonderful. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to coachkiah.com and there is a tab that says retreat. You can also find me on Instagram as coach_Kiah, Kiah. There is a link in my bio there that also goes to the Gals Gone Wild retreat, so you can find more information. But yeah, on social media, my favorite place to hang out is Instagram. I'm also on Facebook as well, barely on TikTok, but it's there. And I do have a podcast called Climbing with Coach Kiah if you want to go back and
Yeah.
have a listen.
Thank you so much, Kaya. I've really enjoyed this conversation today. I could talk to you forever. I will
Likewise,
say from
Holly.
personal experience, attending a retreat with Kaya, it was wonderful. So I don't know if anyone's thinking on the fence about Costa Rica, 100% recommend. Unfortunately, I can't go, just the timing of the year. Oh my gosh, but sitting here talking to you, it makes me be like, well, could I miss? Anyway, so I guess to finish up, if this conversation hits home for any of you, send it to a friend who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Your Ag Empire wherever you stream and come find us online, especially on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear what kind of joy that you're chasing now.